Thank you for joining us on this Monday morning, beautiful autumn morning. It's a bit gray here, but hopefully you're having a good morning wherever you are. I know that we have people from all corners of parts of the world joining us, so thank you for joining us. This is the CEF-funded Weave Project Lab Day that is hosted by Europeana. Weave is a new project that's co-financed by the European Union under their Connecting Europe Facility program, and the hope is to enrich Europeana with great content of tangible and intangible heritage and to develop new tools. This is a workshop, as we're calling a lab day. So while we will share information with you, and hopefully you'll walk away with some new knowledge. We also want to learn from you, so do feel free to use the chats function, the documents, the Word doc we have that's open, and we really, want you to ask us questions. There will be a space at the end of the presentations to ask us some questions and to really open up some conversation and dialogue. So do feel free to put your question, if you think you might forget it, into the chat or into that shared space. This workshop will engage minority communities and cultural heritage institutions. Sorry, not exactly minority communities, but that's the project. But we want this workshop to enhance, to help us think about how different communities might think about participation in Europeana. I will be moderating this along with my colleague Marie-Louise from Coventry University. She'll be supporting with the chat, monitoring the social media. So we're also using Weave. So a lot of what's happening here today will also be shared publicly online. We hope that you understand and walk away with, we'll offer you an introduction to Europeana as to why it's beneficial, and how we share cultural collections in this environment through Europeana and the network of our partners, stakeholders, and followers. You will also gain, hopefully, an understanding of copyright framework that is at the basis of Europeana, and the labels which are included in the Europeana publishing framework. So we can enable, so that you understand how we're thinking about content partners and how to support different collections in a lawful way. We'll also be explaining Europeana's editorial strategy and publication formats and how we are using that within the project, but also we have our Europeana experts. So we have a real powerhouse of Europeana team members here, Weave project members, and so a few housekeeping items. This event will be recorded. We want to, as I said, maximize your participation, so do feel free to check your username. Ideally, if you want to put your first and last name, so that if someone wants to find you after the event, they know where to find you. Feel free to use the chats, the shared space. We'd love it if you leave your camera on. Obviously, we realize that things happen, that the domestics blend and come into the world. I'm the first one to admit that. But if you do need to leave, feel free to turn off the camera. But we love this to be, as shared and as face-to-face as possible. And a little bit about the team. Here are the various partners. Weave stands for Widening European Access to Cultural Communities via Europeana project, which aims to develop a framework to link the tangible and intangible heritage of cultural communities in safeguarding the rich and invaluable cultural heritage which they represent. My colleague Alex, who I'll introduce in a moment, will give you a little bit more of a background on what exactly that means, who are the cultural communities we are engaging with, and who are contributing to the project. Okay, so a real mixed group here about our knowledge and understanding of Europeana as a digital platform and library, Europeana, and how different people have been engaging with it. Okay, So hopefully by the end of today, we'll all be experts in Europeana. And, every time I hear the Europeana team describe something about Europeana, I learn something new. So there's always, I think, something there, because it's an incredible resource that has a number of different strands. And so while today we won't go into all of them, we will pick up on those that feel most relevant to Weave and to our project objectives. So without further ado, I will hand over now to Alexandru Stan, who is my friend and dear colleague, who is leading the research and innovation projects for IN2, which is the organization that he and his colleagues run. Since 2007, he has been active in European research and development projects and collaborating in over 25 EU-funded projects, ranging from CEF frameworks, Horizon 2020, FP frameworks, the list is vast. 25 projects is a lot. And most recently, he has been working in the Weave and the Culture Moves project, both that were coordinated by IN2. He is part of the steering board for the New European Media Initiative and regularly acts as program committee members for international conferences. He has a background in software systems and engineering. And yes, I'm just really excited that Alex can present Weave today. So over to you, Alex.
Thank you very much, Rosa, and good morning, everyone. I'm Alex, and I thank Rosa for this very kind introduction. And I'm very, very happy to welcome everyone to this lab day, which I think that we can now kickstart maybe with a question, which might be an underlying question if you think for Weave. Why cultural communities? Why are they important? So let's see if my screen sharing works. Yes. Why cultural communities? Well, if you remember a couple of years ago, there was a tragic fire at the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, and this has reminded us that even iconic monuments are always at risk. And in fact, it is even the problem is even more deep than this, that cultural heritage, and in many cases cultural heritage belonging to cultural communities which might be marginalized often, are in fact now more at risk than ever. It's also very important to acknowledge that cultural communities, which are characterized by both intangible and tangible heritage, they shape the spaces in which they are. And one important point is that tangible heritage, while it has received a lot more attention during the digitization processes over the last, 20 years, let's say, they are not necessarily the only aspect which is relevant for the heritage of this culture communities. In fact, intangible heritage is just as important, and in many cases, it is the intangible cultural heritage that represents the condition of the creation of tangible artifacts. And with this in mind, we set up the Weave project, where we aim to develop a framework in order to tackle these challenges and to provide the innovative methodologies and tools as way for linking and presenting the connections between tangible and intangible heritage of the cultural communities, bringing this rich and invaluable cultural heritage that they hold and which they represent from the periphery to the center of attention, by making it accessible through Europeana. And in order to do so, one very important aspect of the project is the content the content aggregation to Europeana, where partners of the project will contribute 3D objects, videos, and photographs, in total over 5,000 items to the Europeana portal. And when I speak about communities within the project, I want to quickly go and review what these are. And I will start by saying that we have 5 different types of cultural communities in the project. One of them is the Roma community, represented by ERIAC, a supranational organization, in fact, that deals with Roma heritage and has a mission to bring this to the center of attention and to create discussions around it. We have in the project also Pedexumbo, an organization that deals with traditional Portuguese dance and culture. We're also dealing with the historical dance community. From Spain, we also include the Castellers community. And last but not least, we also have in the project Slovenian tangible heritage community members, where the focus is very much on the 3D representations of their heritage. As I mentioned previously, we are looking at both aspects of methodologies, discussions, community engagement, and capacity building, but also at tools and technologies to support these goals. And for this, the project will create and make available actually to the community 4 different tools, part of the WIF toolkit. One of them is specifically targeting 3D assets and provides a better way to store and to manage 3D models and point clouds, all of this from a browser. We have within the WIF toolkit another tool called Motion Notes, which is specialized in the annotation of videos and more specifically the annotation of movements in space also. So it's a very, very fascinating topic for those of you that might be from this dance specific domain. Moreover, we're looking within the project at how the stories of this cultural communities can be better told, shared, and curated. And for this, we have the Weave Experience tool, which would help with these aspects. And finally, we have a few metadata enrichment tools, which are very useful for annotating and enriching content before it is being aggregated to Europeana. Well, today you are part of this action that we target related to engagement, and we carry this out in this lab day fashion and the methodology, which you see here some pictures of what we did previously when we could meet physically. So it's meant to be a very engaging type of workshop-like event. Of course, now in the virtual space, we have to adapt a bit. But we want to keep the spirit of the lab day actually ongoing. So we invite you, of course, to be as active as you can during today's event, giving us feedback through the polls, through the chat, or through the shared document that Rosa mentioned at the beginning. Also, I would mention that there are a number of upcoming lab days still that you are invited to attend or to check out. There is a full list on our project website. And I would also stress that the WIF project aims to create a repository of resources to support capacity building for cultural organizations and how to deal with tangible and intangible heritage, how to deal with heritage of communities that might have been marginalized previously, how to support the connection with Europeana. And this is a whole strand of the project, and we will be soon making available on our project website some materials in this direction. So please keep an eye there for this as well. Finally, because myself, you've heard that I have a background more in the technical side and software development. I'm also, I want to point to the fact that later on in November, we'll be releasing the first version of the toolkit that I mentioned before. So everyone will be very much invited to create an account and to test out the tools of the project. And with this, I would like to pass the microphone on to Julia Fallon from the Europeana Foundation. And I guess if you have any questions, we can answer them now or later.
I think we'll answer questions a bit later, of our
Right.
questions a bit later.
Thank you.
So yes, that's right. The microphone is going over to Julia Fallon from Europeana Foundation. So we've heard a bit about what Weave is, and Europeana, metadata, all of these big words keep coming up. So maybe Julia can shed some light on what, who, and why Europeana. So Julia Fallon is the Community and Partner Engagement Manager at Europeana Foundation. Julia is the chair of the Rights Statements Consortium, and at Europeana, she is the manager of the Community and Partner Engagement team. So together, they support the development of professionals and organizations working in and around digital cultural heritage. Together, they lead the development of their digital program and a knowledge hub of events, webinars, and resources, all supporting the sector in their digital transformation journey. She's also passionate about supporting emerging professionals and advocating for inclusive and diverse conversations. And so Alex did discuss that, we have different communities, and while Julia and Europeana, we also do have as a project and organization that as our strand. We didn't want to gloss over that in today's Lab Day, which is why we're having the future capacity building webinars in the future. However, Julia will give us a little bit of a flavor of what that means for Europeana. So over to you, Julia. Microphone over.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. And apologies, I was flicking around my screen as I was trying to find how to unmute myself, because despite having done this for 18 months and counting, still these digital tools on the day provide us some challenges. So thank you and welcome this morning to everyone who's joining us. I see some familiar faces and names, and I see some unfamiliar ones. So I hope that today, and also people who watch us offline, that you're going to find this an interesting session. And yeah, I'm just going to jump in and tell you a little bit about Europeana. I know most of you here have said that you're familiar with Europeana. I'd like to just give you a bit of a reminder about then who we are. Again, mindful that this is also recorded, and hopefully we'll have some extra viewers after today. So we're an organisation. We're funded by the European Commission, and we've been working for 10 years now, empowering the cultural heritage sector through its digital transformation. So we're doing that by really driving change in the sector and working with institutions to build awareness of the role of digital transformation, the benefits of it, how to participate, what kind of skills and tools you need to engage with it. And our main aim is really to try and make it easier for people and groups to reuse cultural heritage, to reuse digital cultural heritage, whether that's through education, through research, through creative sectors, and what have you. And digital transformation is a complex journey. It's both the process and the result. So the process of change and the result that you get to. So we are kind of multifaceted in what we're doing in supporting the sector. There we are. So we are made up, generally speaking, of three institutions. When we talk about Europeana, we're not just talking about the foundation, which is just over 60 members of staff working now across Europe. We are working also with a group of just over 40 national and thematic aggregators through the Aggregator Forum, who help to share information, expertise, tools and technologies throughout member states across thematic areas. And we work with the Network Association, which is 3,500 professionals across Europe working towards digital transformation, keen to share their interests and knowledge through 6, soon to be 7 communities of interest. So tackling topics such as research, communication, copyright, impact, and what have you. So if you'd like to find out more about the forum or the network, please let us know and we'll send you some more information on that. So over the past few years and looking ahead, we as an organisation, as an initiative, these 3 pillars, were driven by working to 3 priorities. I'm just going to run through them very quickly, and then I'm going to dig a bit deeper into some of the things we're doing in and around diversity and inclusivity, because that's where our strongest connection, our newest strongest connection with the project is. So firstly, we're working to support and strengthen the infrastructure. And what we mean by the infrastructure is really the technical infrastructure. So supporting the development of tools to help the aggregation workflow, looking at working with projects and partners to develop novel approaches, such as using linked open data, addressing 3D content and what have you, trying to make it easier to manage the data and to share it and publish it. We're also supporting the sector in driving the quest to improve data quality. So we do that through having a standardized framework that helps institutions and professionals explore what they get when they give different levels of quality, how to actually improve quality, which different fields of metadata you're looking at. And also we're looking at different technologies such as machine learning algorithms to actually enrich the data that's already being created. And then finally, we're supporting the building of capacity through events like this, where we bring people together, people from across our network, through our aggregator forum, to share knowledge with each other, to build awareness and to start conversations. So one of the things that's been quite new to us, and a conversation we have been new to starting, probably over the last, I'd say, 1 to 2 years, has been around diversity and inclusivity, and that's it's a really challenging topic for us to be talking about, as we're also learning at the same time as talking. And I think us being a partner in the Weave project really helps us talk more openly and really pushes us to talk more openly about our own journeys and experiences here. So we know, as we've been trying to understand what diversity and inclusivity means to us as an initiative and how we can support the changes across the sector that professionals, institutions, aggregators are interested in making and exploring, we're looking at what that means to us. And so far we are trying to understand how we can create this sort of concept of a brave space where we can talk openly and civilly around some challenging topics, where we can be open with each other and make sure that people participating also feel safe and secure, and that when we are also talking and sharing either through events or through the cultural heritage, that people feel represented as well. We're looking to identify where some of our areas of work are that we could strengthen and improve when we look through the lens of diversity and inclusivity, like who is not represented, who's not in the room, whose voices do we not listen to. And we're also looking at how we can strengthen our things like our editorial output to make it clearer how we are improving and bringing in and representing different voices to the ones that we've heard from. So I want to just give you a flavour of what that looks like in more specifics. So over the last few months, we have been working on a few internal actions and a few external actions. And some of you might recognise some of this. It might reflect things that are already happening in your organisation, your professional journey, or you might see some of it through just participating or being in our network, for example. And some of this is also really clearly driven through our connection with the Weave project. And I would say that, you know, we're always learning as well as an organization. I've already learned this morning, listening to Rosa talk about what she's wearing for the benefit of audio description. I thought, oh, shall I do that? I'm not sure how to, but I've made a note so that I can do that in one of our next sessions. And I think that's, again, one of the strengths of events like this, is to listen to other people's practices and reflect on them and learn. So just back to what we've been doing across the foundation, across the aggregated forum and network. This is just a snapshot. So we've been looking at how we can embed diversity and inclusivity practices in our work across the foundation. We've been working on developing something called a community pact, which is, the idea is a pact helps us guide kind of civil and inclusive online dialogue. We know that things like chat functions, Twitter, forums can be challenging. When you are trying to address sensitive or difficult or new conversations, words can be misrepresented, misunderstood, intentions and subtleties of face-to-face conversations is not present. So we're looking at what can we do there. We're working both within the foundation and across our network and forum to build the idea of a community pact where we agree how we're going to approach this and how we can be brave and also understanding of each other when we maybe make a mistake or don't understand something, so that we can support our learning journey. And again, I think that's a real strength, a real strong connection with the Weave project. You heard Alexandre talk about some of the capacity building activities and resources that are going to be shared in the coming months. So we'll also be contributing to those and learning as we go, as I'm sure a lot of you are. We're also looking at our own products, such as including making alt text standard across all of our websites. And you'll hear from, I think, Adrian in a little bit around some of the work around diverse editorial content. My colleague Isabel has also been working with Europeana SchoolNet to increase the amount of educational resources as well. I've got some really nice articles on Europeana Pro, and if you go over to europeana.eu, there are some lovely editorials where you can also see some different and diverse editorials there. And coming up, we're continuing our own journeys in terms of supporting staff development to actually implement this first version of a community pact. So helping train us for how to moderate, so how to actually be a professional in an environment where we might be tackling some conversations where we think it might result in some sort of challenges or what have you. We're also going to be working across the initiative with the network and forum to develop a roadmap so that we have a really clear and transparent way to articulate the journey we want to take. And then going back into things like our more tangible and visible outputs, we have Black History Month coming up, and so we are looking at developing the editorial content across Europeana.eu and also through Europeana Pro. Now, I just said there we have Black History Month coming up, and I'm realizing as I say that this is not we, it's not me. We are supporting Black History Month, and so again, I can't stress, for me, the whole dive into diversity and inclusivity is a real journey of development. It's why I think we all feel really strongly about working with projects like Weave, working with partners who are really interested to increase the amount of content to be more representative, whether through Europeana or just available anyway, because we've all got this great learning journey to go on. We also have, coming back to the work that we're doing, we also have our annual conference coming up where we've embedded diversity and inclusivity actually across all 3 days throughout the themes of the conference and through things like the decision making to make sure that we are listening to different voices and different perspectives in the events we're putting on. I think that you've heard me talk a bit about, well, this is a journey, we're all learning. We've been doing this for, we've been looking at diversity and inclusivity for between a year and 2 years. And it's become something that as an organization, as an initiative, we're becoming more stronger and more confident to talk about. But this is not just our journey, is it? This is not something that is ours alone. And so I wanted to, before I pass over to Rosa, I wanted to ask you in the audience, if you could maybe share, if you feel comfortable, if you are maybe here because you are new to addressing the massive topic of diversity and inclusivity, or if you are already tackling it in your organization, if you're already working on actions which are designed to help your work in your organization, your professional life be more diverse and inclusive. And I wonder if you could just, share that in the chat. I think it'd be quite interesting to know. And the other thing that when we were preparing for this, workshop, we were talking amongst ourselves that we'd be also interested to know if the work that you are doing is from your own personal interest, or if it's actually something you need to do. Maybe it's within the aims of your organization, or it's in response to, say, some particular community request or engagement. But if you could just drop that into the chat, I think that would be really interesting for us to get to know a little bit more about you and really what brings you here. And whilst you're doing that, I'm just going to pass back to Rosa, who will take us through to the next speaker.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So again, there's that. Thank you, Julia, for, this really great overview describing the 3 priorities for Europeana. I love this idea of multitasking. It feels like we're all somehow doing that. And so, yes, I really appreciate that, this idea of strengthening and improving and building capacity is the pillars of all of the work that you guys are doing there across Europe. And yeah, some big questions, not many answers coming through in the chat, but that's okay. We can put those questions, if you want, into the shared documents, and feel free to answer there. And while we're doing that, I know that's a real, I think interest for us at CEDAR is dance, and so a lot of we've been saying tangible and intangible cultural heritage, but what is an example of intangible? Well, for us it's dance, and that's at the crux of a lot of what we're doing at CEDAR. And so when this opportunity, this project came up, that we could really think about what kind of dance content is available in Europeana. What does that mean? How could we offer some more dance content to this space? It feels like just a really lovely, a great opportunity. So to do that, to kind of help us think through about the different collections and the content that's existing in Europeana, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Adrian Murphy, who I've been in touch with since Europeana Space many moons ago with that project. So Adrian is the collections manager at Europeana. He develops ways of engaging audiences across Europe with the digitized cultural heritage collections found on the Europeana website. He works on participatory campaigns, audience communities, and editorial strategies, as well as curating and writing editorial features such as blogs, galleries, and exhibitions. He's often working in partnership with cultural heritage institutions and consortia across Europe, and has worked on Europeana's campaigns such as Europeana Migration, Women's History Season, Europe at Work, Discovering Europe, and Europeana Sports. Prior to Europeana, he was the digital manager at South London's Horniman Museum and Gardens, where he led on the digital strategy website and social media activities. Welcome, Adrian. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Rosa. That was a very good introduction and quite a good introduction to what I'll speak about today. So hopefully I can move the slides onwards. Okay, so I'm going to look at the ways that Europeana uses our editorial and different engagement tools to engage with communities and audiences across Europe and of course beyond. So as Julia introduced, Europeana's website is a website where you can access records relating to cultural heritage, millions of those, whether images, text, 3D, sound, or video. The website metadata content is available in 35 plus different languages, and the interface of the website is available in 26 different languages. The idea behind this is to create trustworthy cultural heritage using authentic catalogue information from the source, from the cultural heritage institution where those collections are held. Clear attribution to the creators and rights holders, which my colleague Ariadna will follow up with. A visible license or rights statement, and a direct link back to the object on the data provider's website. But with all those millions of objects on Europeana, no one person will ever look through 58 million records and see everything that's there. So we have created areas on the site that bring together these collections. These are either curated searches, which will on specific topics like archaeology, fashion, maps and geography, migration, and many more, or topical pages which bring together the editorial we have published on a variety of topics. So those editorials fall into three different formats: blogs, exhibitions, and galleries. And in the next slides, I will look at the examples of those that we have produced, as well as how these have been supporting our efforts to have more representative and more diverse and more inclusive editorials and narratives on the Europeana website. So blogs are, as you probably can imagine, short articles on a specific theme or topic. They often tell the story of an individual or individual institutions or organizations on topical issues, and can look at the history of specific topics and themes. So some examples of these are the images here. The first one is relating to Roma slavery in Romania, which was written by a freelance journalist in Romania. We had a blog from the Jewish Museum of Stockholm looking at the history of a specific individual who lived in Sundsvall in the north of Sweden. An article about the Gay Games sporting championships that were held in Amsterdam in the late 90s, and subsequently in other places as well. An article about the Dragon Lady, the cliche and the trope of literature and film. And finally, an article about Alvin Ailey Dance Studio. Exhibitions are longer form articles, so they generally span multiple chapters and look at a specific topic from a number of different angles, bringing together collections from many different organizations, mostly across Europe. So two examples here are the top one is an exhibition from the Pagoda project, looking at Chinese cultural heritage as reflected in European collections. And I'm sure Sophie, who follows me, will go into more detail about that, as she was the curator. And the second one is the cornerstone of our current Black History Month season, which looks at Black lives across Europe, highlighting and showcasing a number of individuals through history, all the way back from 1600s to the present day, under a number of different topics, such as art and literature and sport. Galleries, meanwhile, are a curated selection of images and media from the collections that are on Europeana, from those organizations across Europe on specific themes. So we've recently published a gallery about mosques across Europe, a gallery about drag and drag performers, about female authors, and about Black people as reflected in European art. So I think I'm going to skip a bit too fast. Yes. We don't just do this alone, but that's the next slide. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself. This we aim to tell stories from all across Europe, where it's possible to put a location on a piece of editorial, which isn't always the case. This reflects how we do that. So as you can see, really trying to reflect stories from all across Europe as much as possible. And we don't just do this by ourselves, we collaborate a lot, whether of course the staff of the Europeana Foundation write many of these articles, but we also work with the Europeana Aggregators Forum, as well as members of the Europeana Network Association, as well as organizations that are taking part in what are known as generic service projects, such as Weave, as well as other museums, galleries, libraries, and archives all across Europe. And this map shows where those organizations have been located for the year September 2020 to August 2021. Sometimes, of course, in a collaborative project, it's not always easy to put a specific location on a collaboration, but in this case, this shows the places that we can do that. So as I mentioned, and as Julia mentioned as well, at the moment we are having a campaign about Black History Month, but we often do seasons and campaigns of varying scope and duration. Some will last several months, some will last just 1 month. And these are designed to highlight and promote high quality content on our own platforms as well as elsewhere. They bring together a lot of different efforts and editorials in one, under one umbrella, as it were. So the idea of this is to highlight the diversity of heritage in local, national, and pan-European contexts, to raise awareness of how heritage can tell stories about communities, identities, and other topics, and to involve the audience to participate and take part online, sharing their personal memories and experiences. So Rosa mentioned a number of these seasons in my introduction, but Black History Month, Europeana Sport, Discovering Europe, Women's History Month, Europe at Work, Europeana Migration, and Art Nouveau are just a number of the seasons we've ran over the past few years. Women's History Month it takes place each year in March. Our first one, I think, was 2018, but don't quote me on that one, I could be wrong. But since then, we've run it multiple times, and we've showcased stories from 4 centuries of women's history, with more using the cultural heritage collections that are on Europeana to showcase and illustrate women's history all across Europe. Currently in Black History Month, we're sharing stories, projects, and collections highlighting Black history in Europe and beyond. This is done on the Europeana website through, for example, biographies of individuals or looking at specific topics, but also on our professional website, Europeana Pro, highlighting and focusing on organizations and projects that are working in the area of Black history. Participation is an important part of what we do, and I'll outline a few examples of that. On Europeana now, you can create and curate your own galleries, which is a relatively new function for our website, allowing the user to make their own galleries on whatever topic they feel like. Some of these can be public galleries, and some you can keep private as you prefer. For many years, we have run collection days and transcribathon events. Collection days are events mostly held in museums, galleries, libraries, archives across Europe, where we invite the public to come and share their stories under specific topics. We've done these on the topics of World War I, 1989 and the fall of the Iron Curtain, migration, working lives and industrial heritage, and currently are doing this under the topic of sport. This is an example of the form by where we do this. So people can contribute by coming, of course, to a collection day event. During the pandemic, that was not so possible, and people can also share their stories under those topics online also. And Transcribathon is a website where material, mostly textual material, can be transcribed, and there's a kind of a competition element to that. So you join a race to transcribe and annotate historical documents. Each year in October, we run a competition called GIF It Up, which is a competition from ourselves, the Digital Public Library of America, Trove, which is a sort of Australian version of Europeana, Digital NZ, and a number of other projects, including organizations like Japan Search and the Art Institute of Chicago. And in this, we challenge people to reuse openly licensed cultural heritage material to produce and share GIFs and animations. And it really is an amazing example of the creativity that cultural heritage can inspire. So beyond Europeana, I won't talk about it too heavily today, but we do a lot in terms of education and our initiatives in that area. My colleague Isabel Crespo works particularly on that, but I won't touch on that too much just now. Recently this year, we have started making email courses where we bring together a kind of curated selection of either editorials that are already on Europeana or new articles, and send those to subscribers over the course of a course, which in some cases is around a month, in others it can be a shorter duration. We have a partnership with Daily Art and social media. So Daily Art, if you don't know, is a website and app which, as the name maybe suggests, sends a new artwork every day to users. And so we regularly contribute and collaborate with them, featuring artworks that are openly licensed from Europeana. That is, the Daily Art app has around 700,000 different users. So a really nice way to extend the reach of the collections that are shared on Europeana. On our social media, we have many different followers, 122,000 Facebook, nearly 42,000 on Twitter, 28,000 or so on Pinterest. Our newsletter subscribers are 50,000. And on Instagram, just recently, we passed 7,000 followers. And through these, we promote the editorial that we do, as well as all the various professional projects that we are involved in, and our own professional work, of course. So, to help any organization that may want to share their collections and write about them on Europeana, we've created this page that's linked here on Europeana Pro, which includes our editorial guidelines, giving the ideas of what we generally look for, what we think works best, and how you can propose your own ideas to us. And please feel free to check that out. So I think that's the end of my presentation, and I'm not sure if I'm handing back to Rosa or directly to Sophie.
Hello, yes, you hand back to me so that I can introduce our lovely Sophie. Thank you for that, Adrian. Thank you so much. And I think we've, started to understand that there's an incredible amount of content that's available on Europeana. And so we do need to, as you say, curate that in some way and to make these collections. And, it sounds like you guys are doing, reusing that content in a number of ways through the exhibitions, the blogs, contributing to daily art. So it's really exciting to hear that. Having said that, I think it's also really important to highlight how you work with the communities to help curate those collections, because that process also decentralizes the power. So it's a shared then way of looking at that, and that's a main goal of Europeana. Of Weave, and what we're trying to do with the various lab days and the cultural communities we're working with. How would you like your content to be shared? How would you write about it? What language would you use? And so to do that and to help us through that process, we have Sophie, who is working with the Weave team and who has who's been part of several projects and has a great deal of experience and expertise in doing and going through that process and priming us. So without further ado, I will introduce Sophie, who is an alumna of KU Leuven in Belgium, where she graduated in musicology and medieval and Renaissance studies. She currently, she's at the Institute for Cultural Studies at KU Leuven and at Photo Consortium, Europeana's thematic aggregator for photography. She's a digital content curator there. She has curated a wide range of editorials and virtual exhibitions for Europeana, as well as the physical exhibitions of All Our Yesterdays, Thousands Are Sailing and Blue Skies, and The Red Panic. Currently, she is active in several European projects involving digital cultural heritage and user engagement strategies, among which Europeana XX is part of. Thank you so much, Sophie. I hand the virtual space, over to you.
Thank you, Rosa. That was very, very eloquent and invigorating. Good morning, everyone. I'm happy that I can be Adrian's sidekick for the day. I have a few minutes only to tell you from, an experienced expert's point of view, what it is like to work with Europeana collections as a curator, as a storyteller in the service of, as Rosa explained, a wide range of projects from the Europeana family. So I do not operate from the Europeana team in and of itself, but I come, I stick my nose to the window in different project contexts and with different teams. And some of these teams definitely touch upon issues of inclusivity, diversity, and participation. And so my little talk today will give some examples of things I've worked on and how those considerations came into play. All in all, my experience entails about 8 years of storytelling with Europeana collections. It started with a very large project devoted to photography, where we contributed many 10,000s of vintage photographs to Europeana. As Rosa explained, I'm currently still in Europeana XX, and I recently helped finalize the project devoted to Europeana China, Pagoda. So this was one of particular relevance to the topics we're discussing today. I've been writing in traditional formats, the ones that Adrian showcased, the blogs, exhibitions, the galleries, but also in the past year or so have been experimenting with different modes of editorial engagement, if you will. What we try to do to go from traditional to experimental, and in some cases back, is remediate and reconceive content in different formats for different target groups, for different media, so that a story gets this kind of horizontal visibility that allows for a deeper insight, a deeper digging into a subject, and of course a wider spread, a wider distribution. We think that in this way, increasingly, we are helping to extend the reach and the representativity of Europeana. A few of the campaigns and the collections and feature pages we've been contributing to, the photography was the very first one, as you can see over there. The other ones you see increasingly touch upon issues of diversity and inclusivity. For instance, the Women's History Month is a campaign that we really love to produce editorial for every single year. Whatever project we are in, we try to link our project of the day to women's history and contribute as much as we can, because this is really a highly favored read, a highly favored campaign by Europeana users, and such an important theme to keep on addressing. With a view to Chinese heritage, this was the first time that Europeana had a project specifically devoted to not only cross-cultural but also cross-continental heritage collections in Europe. And it was very important that we struck the right tone with this project, and that we took it for a safe and a good and an inspiring departure, so as to allow future adventures, if you want, ventures into Chinese heritage to ensue. And then the 20th Century Project, as you can imagine, this is very recent heritage. So these sensitive stories from the 20th century are very much alive in the Europeana community of today. So again, while our consortium was really eager to address societal issues, issues of civil rights, of underrepresented or misrepresented communities, we also saw a strong need to work with domain experts and topical experts to tell those stories in a really well-researched and a really representative and respectful way. A few of the blogs, galleries, and exhibitions we've been contributing to, for instance, the Pagoda Exhibition, indeed. Adrian already touched upon it. This is a multi-chapter narrative where we chose the cultural, tradition-related point of view. So we chose not to go into political polemics or the big societal themes that I think need much more than a project of 18 months. This is, in my personal opinion for a maiden project into Asian heritage, not the way to go if you want to be really respectful of a specific slice of heritage. So we chose to take it from the cultural point of view and really show where the heritage of the East and the West connect and interlink. The exhibition below, People on the Move, was the one we made for the migration project. Again, it was so important to tell these extremely personal stories of people whose heritage somehow has been embedded now in Europeana in a way that really pays honor to what they have went through. You know, this was part of their lives, and it's up to us to devise a tone and a mode of storytelling that shows the bigger picture but stays respectful of individuals as well. A few examples of blogs. The one below is indeed the one about the Dragon Lady and how a fairly seemingly innocent term like the Dragon Lady that we all know from comics and manga and from television series, where did it stem from? That was not so innocent. And these blogs give us a really engaging, attractive and visual way to tell such stories and to raise awareness. The same again for the LGBTQ community and how they have been represented in photography and film throughout the 20th century. I must admit, this was one of the hardest blogs ever to find good material on. So not that there is nothing in Europeana to use, but due to licensing issues and so on, we really had to turn it up a notch to really flesh out the story with enough images. And I think that this in and of itself is something we should consider and we should focus on in the future. Recently, we've been experimenting with new formats such as podcasts, documentary recordings, vlogs and pop-up exhibitions. Pop-up exhibitions are made with a MUPOP technology and offer a hybrid heritage experience between the digital and the physical. And with vlogs and podcasts, probably you can imagine a little bit what that would be like. Again, we are exploring specific niches of the Europeana audience that we believe were not catered for, but could really help diversify the Europeana offering. What we always aim for in our projects and what we feel very much as a connection with the Europeana editorial team is that we try to be multi-voiced. So we really try to manage well tone of voice and the narrative styles that we use according to the format that we're writing for, the specific groups that we are either representing or that we are targeting, and of course the collections that we are representing by using materials for the editorials. So this Europeana network that is a polyphony of voices and opinions and perspectives, I think as editors and curators, we have this duty of care to also take that to our publications. What can I see as an evolution with the Europeana editorials from a thematic point of view is that we are increasingly evolving towards more inclusive and diversified storytelling modes, and that we are really picking up the stories from the collections and from the heritage communities that they are stemming from to devise which stories we are going to tell. So it's less top-down, more bottom-up. And of course, we are in a way, if you like, we are influencers. Even if we're not the big fashionistas on Instagram, as storytellers, yes, we are portraying opinions and points of view. So we are influencers, and we have the duty to do it in a way that is as inclusive and representative as possible. So for me, the bliss of working with collections such as those presented on Europeana is that, of course, everything is at your fingertips. It's so accessible. Everything is immediately available. What a luxury. 53 millions of records. The data quality really it has been on the rise for the past 5 years, I think, with great big steps, leaps even forward. The terms of use are always clear cut, so you never have to reach out to institutions to find out, is it in copyright, can I use it, and blah, blah, blah. The labeling makes that really, really clear. The range of topics is really panoramic. There's some lovely linking going on, and I do not even only mean the use of linked open data that make it really unequivocally clear what certain terms mean, what certain concepts mean, but also the linking of the different collections just by having them together in this big, big, big Europeana space. It opens up new venues for curators like me to devise stories that you wouldn't even have thought of without Europeana. And then there's this potential for co-creation. We found in our projects that it's really easy using Europeana to devise content and to think of stories together with partners that are very different in their inspiration and in their location. Wherever you are and whoever you are, with Europeana, it's very easy to create compelling content. And of course, when you're done with your content, well, the world's your stage, because I do feel that Europeana offers this window to the world of what is European cultural heritage. Of course, there are days when the blues kind of reign over the bliss. And that is when you see that accessibility and availability might not always be optimal because we still have some metadata pitfalls. Sometimes it's almost impossible to find what you're looking for because perhaps the information that has been provided with the collections is not optimized. It's something that's very much in flux, very much at the attention of content providers and project teams. Improve those metadata and improve that accessibility. The terms of use, as I said, very clear from the labeling, but sometimes that also means that it's a no-go, right? Copyright is copyright, and then you have to sometimes accept to go with a less appealing record that does allow you reuse. Then this panoramic scope is great, but in a way we should always be aware that the range of collections in Europeana is also telescopic. So we are talking about this tube, this channel, where a certain amount of European collections is available, but definitely it's not an exhaustive offering, right? So it's always useful to keep that in mind and to self-correct a little bit when necessary. The world as a stage, yes, but how inclusive is the internet after all? You could ask. In name of the community, well, yes, we try to represent well the communities. We try to pick up their stories and to take them along. But sometimes it's worth asking ourselves who should tell which story. It's not always possible to have communities do that themselves. And even just as it is not always possible for us to tell these stories in the exactly right way. So here we are constantly scanning common ground and modes of collaboration. And then finally, some content that screams for context in Europeana is simply at the moment beyond the scope of what we can do. So this is just in terms of capacity. We are not there yet to address every single record that is perhaps lacking a story, lacking some contextualization, and therefore is currently not ideally represented in Europeana. These are all things that we're very passionately working on, and I hope can continue to do so in years to come. That's it for me, and I'll hand over to Rosa.
Thank you, Sophie. Thank you for that. You've taken us through the digital bliss as well as the blues, and I know that navigating a lot of this content as well as you said, the horizontal visibility and how we kind of move in and out of working in that way, and that means different things to different people. But at the core of that, I think it's important to think about copyright and how you very clearly said that each item has copyright attached to it, so it's very clear what you can and can't do. But what does that really mean, and what does that mean in terms of some items like dance content or audio, things that are a little less kind of clear? So to help us kind of think through copyright in terms of Europeana, but hopefully giving us a little bit, or a moment to ask some questions. We have Ariadna Matas, who contributes to the management and development of Europeana's policies and frameworks with a strong focus on copyright, and supports their implementation throughout the Europeana network. Ariadna has studied law in Spain, in Germany, and in France, and has a master's in intellectual property law. Before joining Europeana, Ariadna worked for the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions on copyright matters. She's done a number of things, and without further ado, we have Ariadna here, who can help us kind of go through this maze of what it means to add copyright to content that's inside of Europeana. Ariadna?
Thank you so much, Rosa. And thank you so much for this introduction. Also mindful of time, feel free to, if I don't see messages with warnings that I'm running over, feel free to say it out loud, because I want to make sure we have time for questions at the end.
Yes, that's right. We will. I have seen questions coming up, so I will ask those at the end. So thank you. Thank you to those. And this might spark a few more questions.
Perfect. So I wanted to give you a couple of notes on how Europeana supports open access via trying to sort out the legal challenges, specifically the copyright challenges that arise when sharing digital cultural heritage online. And then I wanted to touch upon some ethical questions, but that's a very big word. I am aware of its complexities, but I wanted to give you a couple of pointers of some questions that we're asking ourselves and how we might be tackling them. And so just to start with the reference of the fact that we work with a very large number of institutions, thankfully through 38 accredited thematic, national, regional, and domain aggregators. But that means working with many different copyright legislations and many different particular situations, such as institutions working with public domain material, institutions working with material whose copyright they're not much aware of because it's very difficult to track, institutions working with content that is protected and whose rights are held by someone else. So these very diverse scenarios need to be streamlined into one, let's say, a standardized space, so that people coming into Europeana does not need to navigate all these very complex and different questions. So, and in particular, we're dealing with thumbnails of the content that we store in our servers, metadata, which we also store in our servers and share online, and digital objects, which we link to from the data provider side. To deal with this diversity of scenarios, we designed what we call the Europeana licensing framework that many of you might be familiar with. And one particular element within this framework is the data exchange agreement. It's a standardized contract that Europeana and its data providers sign, through which data providers, and that is the particular clause that helps us solve one part of this challenge, data providers clarify that they have gone through the due diligence to check that this material can be shared online. So Europeana does not ask for the story behind getting this type of permission. We just want to make sure that through your judgment, through your under your national laws, this material can be made available online, and in particular via Europeana. But at the same time, we want to make it, once the visitor gets to Europeana, we want to make it as easy as possible for that visitor to understand if the material can be reused and to what extent or under which conditions. As Sophie was saying, this standardization of rights conditions and reuse conditions is a cornerstone of being able to share and reuse this content as much as possible, and therefore to multiply its impact and to give it a prominent role in research, education, creation, lifelong learning, etc. And so we want to make sure that any visitor coming to Europeana understands in a very simple way how the material can be used and if it can be used. But at the same time, we're dealing with multiple scenarios. So with cultural heritage institutions that do not practice expressing rights online, or that do express them, but through very complex terms and conditions that are difficult to navigate. And especially in a European-wide context, we're dealing with multilinguality as well. But when a visitor comes to Europeana, we need to be able to make it as understandable as possible, no matter the language or regional context they come from. So an additional element of our licensing framework, which is reflected also in our data exchange agreement, is getting each of our data partners to accept or to make the effort of assigning every digital object a specific right statement. And then this is accompanied with one metadata field in our metadata structure, the EDM rights field, which then communicates this standardized rights information to our visitors. If in this flowchart you see kind of the questions and answers, it's a bit simplified, but it's the main questions and answers that a Europeana data partner should go through to identify which of these standardized tools is the best one to assign to a digital object. So which of the 6 Creative Commons licenses, 2 Creative Commons tools, and 6 rights statements that we work with might be the best one to apply to the specific digital object. And it has to be one of these 12 options that we work with, which we have picked thinking and hoping that it provides enough scenarios to have an accurate right statement for every situation. So as a result, in combination with this EDM rights field, when a visitor comes to Europeana, the item page shows rights information in a standardized way directly below the image. In this case, public domain, good news, the material can be used further with no copyright restrictions. And that also helps us give the possibility to filter material down by the possibilities to reuse it and to assess from Europeana to have an understanding of how much of the material that we display can be used further. So in our efforts also to support reuse, there's another condition that we ask our data providers to comply with, which is accepting to free the metadata from any copyright restrictions by using the Creative Commons public domain dedication, CC0. And this comes from the idea that, first of all, metadata is most likely not protected by a copyright, although there might be a few exceptions. And also from the fact that this metadata was generated by the cultural heritage institutions, so it should be relatively simple to clear out the copyright restrictions because the institution is the owner. So alongside the image that you're seeing on the item page, then the metadata can be used freely by any researcher, educator, etc. And again, I'm talking freely, specifically thinking of removing copyright limitations. So Creative Commons licenses, Creative Commons tools, and right statements, they remove copyright limitations, and a few right statements, they talk about some related types of limitations, but it's mostly about clearing copyright. So that means that there might be still portrait right questions, privacy questions, trademark questions, other types of rights that might exist on the image that these licenses do not clear. So, well, without trying to be too pessimistic, hopefully we're thinking that the copyright question is the most complex one, the least harmonized one. Portrait rights might not be that harmonized either, but at least we get that part out of the way. But that also takes me to another question. So other than other limitations, other legal limitations that might exist, is getting rid of these legal obligations, having that legal compliance checked, is that enough? Is this what we want? Or are there ethical questions that go slightly beyond what we need to do to comply with the law that we also want to be mindful of? And I would like to think that our laws are mindful of the ethical values of the society and of the people who vote for them, but it might not be the case always. It might not be the case by some ethical questions that we want to kind of pursue for certain communities that we want to defend, or certain individuals as well. So it's very fair to ask ourselves that question. If I can take you back to this flowchart, for instance, I would say that one ethical stance that Europeana has been taken all this time is defending the public domain. So up at some point, the law doesn't talk about it anymore, but we still want to make sure that we remove any technical barriers or other types of barriers to this material actually being free for people to use, because we believe that this is particularly designed so that people can benefit from it at some point. And so any barriers established by an institution when the material is in the public domain would seem slightly unfair to the objectives we pursue. But at the same time, as Europeana takes this kind of strong stance in favor of supporting reuse, there are also other questions that might pop up, ethical questions probably, that we might want to consider. So in this flowchart at the very left, there's that red box, and the question and the answers are drafted in very general terms, but they try to get our data providers to stop and think whether there are additional concerns that need to be taken into consideration of any type before making this material available online or before even thinking of assigning it a right statement. So because mostly thinking that the making available online might have certain consequences for a certain community or a certain individual, or it's maybe the making available online alongside an open license, because this particular challenge would then be maximized by giving a kind of broader use to this material. So we've seen initiatives that are quite interesting, like the Be Fair and Care initiative, which tries to accommodate the FAIR principles to certain principles, guidelines, kind of activities that could reconcile the push for openness with the kind of wishes or sensitivities of a certain community. In this case, it's particularly thinking of cultural, traditional cultural expression, and it is designed by the Global Indigenous Data Alliance. So these are principles to particularly support indigenous communities as cultural heritage institutions manage data from that sector openly. So these ethical obligations, is this, or ethical duty of care, let's say, is this something that should stem from cultural heritage institutions in the pipeline of work providing data to Europeana? So should they be the ones that consider whether the making available online itself can be challenging, or whether it's the metadata that goes with the content that can reach challenges, or even the open license that is assigned to the digital cultural heritage that is challenging? And then Europeana should wonder whether our framework, such as the Europeana licensing framework, is flexible enough to give space for these questions to be answered in an ethical way. But as I was hearing Sophie talk, I was also thinking, is there a duty to share certain information? Is the retention of certain information also an ethical question? Do we believe that not giving access to certain heritage can also have ethical implications, or not further researching it? So both the sharing or the not sharing can have ethical questions, and this is where the question becomes extremely complex for me. And on the other side, there might be a duty of care from our users. So those who come into Europeana and wish to use digital cultural heritage from the Europeana website, should they also be considering certain things? In this regard, we actually published some years ago a set of guidelines that go in that direction that I find very interesting, that we call the Public Domain Usage Guidelines. So as the name says, they are guidelines and not, it's not a contract, it's not something that users are forced to respect, but it's highly encouraged to respect them, and they are part of our terms and conditions. And they are public domain usage guidelines because we see that where copyright disappears, so where the public domain enters the game, that's where material has the potential to travel more freely and to be reused the most. So that's where some of these questions might become more important. Through these guidelines, therefore, we ask users of Europeana material to give credit to the institution, to the author, and to all the aggregators that made it possible to for this content to be discovered, to protect the reputation of creators and providers and show respect for the original work. So if material is, Rosa, you're gonna give me the warning?
Very soon, very soon. This is,
Okay.
you know, we could be here all day, I think, learning about this, but yes, 1 minute.
Perfect. So I'm almost done. So for instance, if the work is transformed, to make sure this transformation is not attributed to the original author, to show respect for the creator as well. So if the creator does not want the work to be used in a specific way, then this should be respected, even though there's no legal obligation to do that. But we believe it's important to share knowledge. So if more research is done and more metadata is created, to share this alongside the work, and be culturally aware. So specifically defend the wishes of a specific community from which the material might stem. and to further support efforts to enrich the public domain. So give back to the institution that made the effort of digitizing and making available online public domain material, and preserve public domain marks and notices as well. So these are kind of starting from a very broad and vague concept. I'm finishing with these very specific notes. I hope that's still useful to have a conversation around these ideas. So thank you, Rosa, and back to you.
Yes, thank you. And, you know, again, this opens up a lot of different questions for the various content that we're working with, our own institutions. All of this information will be made available. We'll share the slides with everyone via email later this week through the Eventbrite page that you signed up through. We also have the Word document, so feel free to add your questions there, and we'll try to reply to those as well. But we did have a question from Sally for Adrian, who said, how closely do you work with Collections Trust and towards a national collection project in the UK? And before that, before Adrian replies to that, I want to say, John also raised an important point. He says, it's important to note that just because an image is in copyright, it doesn't mean it can't be used. One just has to contact the rights owner to license it. The copyright owners are generally flexible depending on the use and are open to cooperative partnerships where usages are commercial. Thank you for that, John. And Adrian, if you could reply to Sally's question, please.
Thanks, Rosa. Thanks, Sally. Certainly, Collections Trust previously were a aggregator for Europeana via their Culture Grid website service. I'm not currently sure of the current status of that. Maybe one of my colleagues might know the answer, but in terms of the Towards the National Collection, I think we're certainly aware of them. And I know one of my colleagues, I think it might have been Ariadna, but I could be wrong, spoke at an event that they held recently. But I don't know if we have a particular formal relationship, I'd say.
Thank you for that, Adrian. Thank you. So yes, as a final kind of wrap up, we've heard a lot about Weave, Europeana and its various strands of work, the number of content, some of the initiatives. I love the GIF it up, that I really just enjoy that, finding that pops up on Twitter sometimes. We've learned a lot about kind of the general thinking and flow charts within Europeana, and thinking about rights, the different licenses that we might add to different content. But also, I love the way you framed that, Ariadna, around the values, these ethical component, and what are the values? How is it that we want, particularly now with cultural heritage, both tangible and intangible, how is it that we share our knowledge, share our cultural heritage content, and how does that align or not align with our values? And so within Weave, we're really thinking about, we're asking ourselves these questions because we want to model some of that thinking. And, what does it mean to share dance content? What does it mean to share content that's from a specific community? What language might be used? Are we in the same conversations? How do we do that as an institution? How do we do that as representatives of institutions or as artists and people? And so again, there's no one way to answer these questions, but I think that these kinds of spaces open up, it's knowledge sharing, but also opens up an opportunity for us to think about and reflect on that critically, artistically, personally. So thank you so much to everyone for joining us. As we said, we have a number of lab days that will be happening mainly online, but some will be happening in their local context. We have recordings of those previous lab days that are on the Weave project page. We have a blog that we regularly publish. We also have a number of different platforms that we try and use, like Twitter. So do feel free to stay in touch and follow us. Join future lab days. Send us any of your questions, and hopefully we can, include some of your voices into the project in a number of these ways. Thank you so much on behalf of everyone who's part of the Weave team and the Europeana for hosting this day. Thank you so much.